Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Okay, Dad, today's episode is unique. And I know I might have said that in the past. However, today I really mean it. You're going to want to listen all the way to the very end of the show because we're doing something we've never, ever done before. This is almost episode 200. This is episode 191. So we're 200 episodes in. Almost. And we're launching something today that we've never, ever done before, and you're going to want to hear it. So listen to the very end, and we can't wait to hear what you have to think about the new thing we're releasing today at the end of the show. For now, consider this. Have you ever tried to teach your child a key life skill? For example, if your kids are really young, you might be still doing like potty training or helping them learn how to bathe themselves or, open a bag of chips without knocking them all around the kitchen. Maybe they're a little bit older and you're showing them how to tie a tie, or if you have a daughter, how to braid her hair. Or maybe you're teaching them some adult skills like how to pay taxes or how to apply for a passport. Or one biggie that if you're old enough, you've been through this, teaching your son or daughter how to drive a car. Man, that is both invigorating and frightening if you've ever been in the passenger seat while you've done that. I'm 3 kids in, and I'm pretty confident that process took a couple years off my life expectancy in each case. So I was going to live to 96. Now I'm down to like 91 for having taught 3 boys how to drive, and I still got 2 more to go. What are some guiding principles that can help us do this well? Because we're going to have to do it. We're going to get to do this often, sometimes at a small scale, sometimes at a big scale. So I'm excited to talk about that. And I just gave you a bit of a foreshadowing, a sneak preview for the thing that we're launching at the end of today's episode. So for that, you'll just have to wait. Lawson, how are you doing, my friend? You just got back from a power vacation.
Yeah, dude. I was free diving in the Galapagos Islands. How's that?
Wow. I thought you were going to say you went to like the 4-H camp out at the national park near you. Instead, it was what? You were free diving in the Galapagos Islands?
Dude, it's epic. It's a worldwide conservation place. Did some free dives. It's like swimming around in an aquarium down there. It's just unbelievable. And had a really cool God moment a few times down deep and just looking around thinking, man, he's down here too. It was really cool.
Wow. Reminds me of the psalm that says, like, if I go to the highest of heights, you're there. If I go to the lowest of the depths, you're still there. You can't go where God isn't. That's really cool, man. Well, and you're putting a strain on our friendship, obviously, because you've been back for a week or 2 now, and I don't have any real pictures of your
working on it.
Experience. Yeah, working on it. Man, look, here's the thing, okay?
I'm serious.
I hear this all the time, okay? Working on it. It's coming into business, this week.
Right.
I don't got time for this. Hey, remember, Dad, as we're doing today's show, these shows are not free. Somebody pays the bills around here. And one of those people is Range Leather. They help by sponsoring this show and bringing it to you totally free. So do them a favor and go to their website at rangeleather.com and put in the code MJ15 and get you something amazing. For example, an Atna mini belt bag, a Rainier mini crossbody tote, a Denali market tote, earrings, accessories, wallets. They've got amazing products handcrafted in the good old US of A out of Horween leather. I've been to their shop. I've seen them work like elves just hammering away.
I want to do that. I really want to go see them.
So cool. I mean, it's literally one of the coolest retail places and workshops I've ever been to on planet Earth. Get yourself out to Laramie, Wyoming, but not in the month of April, because evidently that's the one month in Laramie with the greatest amount of snowfall, unless you like snow, in which case, go to Laramie in April. Go to rangeleather.com and order something amazing. Now, as we said before we dive into the content, today's show comes with a major release. Listen all the way to the end. Don't forget. But I want to tell you briefly about a guy named Greg. Greg came to our website recently, and he snagged 2 one-on-one guides. These are Bible studies that you can do with your son on various topics. He grabbed one on embarking. He grabbed one on clean hearts or purity. And he said his overriding goal is to break an intergenerational cycle of the fathering approach. He wants fresh perspectives and insight that only come from the Lord, and he wants the tools to deliver them in a practical way. Way to go, Greg. Thanks for coming by the shop at manhoodjourney.org. You can go to our shop right now and snag Bible studies, ebooks, digital courses. We've got it all. We even have a super cheap all-access pass you can go snag and get everything under one roof. Go to manhoodjourney.org. Check it out. Lawson, as we dive into today's show, we want to talk about teaching our kids valuable life skills. And rather than go through every single one, like how to properly use, a kitchen knife and all that, let's talk about guiding principles. But before we do, tell us about a time or two when you had to teach your daughters a life skill and how that went for you. Or just give us some stories where we can laugh at you. I'm sorry, I meant to say with you. We can laugh with you.
Right. Yeah, I think this is a good topic. It's like, it's some practical stuff to think about. Us dads are out here just doing our best, and sometimes we get it right and go, "Wow, I'll be dang, got that right." And then other times it's like, got to revisit that. I was curious. We have a group text going with the family with Audrey and the girls, and it's all day, every day. I love it. We keep in touch really well. So that's just fun. But I threw it out to them and said, hey, part of the topic that we're covering next is these, kind of practical life skills. When I say to you, what sticks out in your memory, what pops into your brain when I ask, what do you remember about, growing up and learning some sort of life lesson? And it was so funny. A couple of things, like the girls are very different, and as dads, we got to understand the personalities of our kids. You got to know that one responds this way to something and one, different love language for this other one. And they have different operating MOs in their brain. Their operating systems function differently. It's not one size fits all way of parenting. So I've got, here's an example of their whole life. It's just the way I work. And so I would present that to them as, hey, look, mom and dad are going out for a date night. Here are the things that you guys want you to do before we get home, and I would hand them to the babysitter and let the girls know, a little chore list, little thing. Because that's how I operate, right? I like little lists. I like checking boxes off.
Is this like things like retile the bathroom
while we're
fix
gone
that hole in the roof?
Right. No, it's like prepare yourself for tomorrow at school, and just little things. But that's like I've got these 3x5 cards, and it's not uncommon for me to hand the girls a little list, and help them stay on task. It's just kind of always been my thing with them. But I'd forgotten about it, frankly, because they're grown now. They don't need my list. But that came up in the group text, and Abby, who is more like she makes her own lists now.
Yeah, okay.
She's like, that's how her brain works. That's how she keeps herself organized. And so she was like, yeah, I remember the lists that we would get, and I was like, ooh, here we go. All right, And so she'd tackle it, and Olivia's immediate response in the text thread was, nope, that's a trigger. That's a trigger for her.
I'm going to go call my therapist.
She's like, oh, I just get the heebie-jeebies when I see dad coming with that stupid list. And because, if we were going to tackle the house, cleaning the house up, somebody's got to do the sweeping and taking the trash and, straightening the sofa and whatever. So I would list these things out. But Olivia would rather just go, hey, let's clean the house, crank that music up, and let's dance around while we do work, And so
Snow White action. Well, Snow White action. We're going to whistle while we work. Let's go.
But it was a good reminder to me of like teaching responsibility is one of the kind of principles that we want to hone in on today. And that's a silly little example, of the way that we did it. Something that came to mind for them. But it was I'm presenting that because it was a reminder to me that we all operate in different ways. Our brains function and we get satisfaction out of practical life skill kinds of things in different ways. Another one is taking some time and understanding, now that you're making a little bit of money, there's tithing, there's saving, there's gifting, and going through why that matters and what about it is both biblical and just falls in the right thing to do. And then even, beyond that, when they really started making like an actual paycheck and came back and said, hey, so explain tax. I see here where it says taxes, federal taxes. And that's like, that was a lot of money. What? So I'm doing what you're doing, which is laughing, right? Like,
then you show them one of your paychecks, and your tax burden is more than their whole paycheck, and then they start laughing.
Right. But it's like relatives. It's like, man, oh man, what? Tell. And I'm like, okay, now that we have your attention, because we've talked about this before, but you just weren't making money. Now that this is real, let's talk about what this is. And so now, maybe it'd help you pay attention to other things. Like, where is that money going, like what's being done with it? Now you've got a keener interest. But just those kinds of topics, I think, are opportunities for us dads to learn more about our children, to reflect on God's word and how he instructs, maybe see also ourselves in God's eyes as he is teaching us practical life skills through this interaction that we get to have in real life with our children.
Well, and I think that's one of the guiding principles that it's so easy to forget until you think about it through God's perspective or his lens, right? So one of the principles I want to talk about is the principle of just the spiritual gift of patience, the fruit of patience. One of the things that we're learning when we teach someone else a skill is patience, because by definition, they should not be very good at it in the beginning. Like the whole point is they're learning this skill. So their first few tries or their first few 100 tries might be a whole lot less effective. So for example, my wife is an amazing cook. Like I always dream about her being on one of those cooking shows where you get a fixed number of ingredients in a very short amount of time, because like she can literally you could drop her into any kitchen anywhere on
the
earth.
Number of kids that you guys have and the mouths to feed, she's got to get creative and quick.
She could stand in the middle of a kitchen and then you give her like 5 minutes and go, look, you got to survey the kitchen. You got to find out what equipment is in here. You got to find out what ingredients, open the fridge, eyeball it, look in the pantry. And then you can scratch your chin for 60 seconds and you got to make dinner. And 40 minutes later, you're eating a gourmet dinner. And I don't care what's in the pantry. I don't care what. It's like, it's unbelievable. We've gone to, I don't know how many, 50 Airbnbs over the last 20 years or places to rent, to stay. And she's always opening stuff and figuring out and going, all right. And she's like turning napkins into coffee filters and like, just, it's unbelievable. So like
Chef MacGyver, that's her show.
But what's crazy is she's taught pretty much all of our boys at some level, some basic cooking skills, right? Which she would not dare do that with me. She would not dare do that with me because she's like, you can't move fast enough in a kitchen. And she's like, okay, take these eggs and, they've been boiled. Now peel the eggs. And like 48 minutes later, I'm still peeling the eggs. And she's going, oh my gosh, will you please get done with the eggs? So like, I really test her patience in the kitchen. Yet, for all of our boys.
On purpose, so that she's like, get out of here?
Is this being recorded?
I know your style.
I on advice of my lawyer, I declined to answer the question under my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So what fascinates me, though, is when she goes into mom mode, she will help our boys learn a lot of these essential skills. And so what's crazy is, though, we both know she could have dinner ready in 30 minutes, right? But it's going to take 2 hours if she teaches the 10-year-old how to help make it, or the 15-year-old how to help make it.
I see where you're going.
So one thing we're going to have to do as we teach our kids these skills is we're going to have to work the muscle and receive the fruit of patience as we go, right? One of the verses I like to try to remember if I'm teaching someone a skill for the very first time is Proverbs 15:1. It says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." And I think about that verse often because my smart mouth gets me in most trouble. In fact, if I think of all the trouble I've gotten in my entire life and I could put it in a giant pie chart, 70 some odd percent of it is probably due to my mouth. And so this idea of having a soft answer is very important as we're teaching our kids life skills. There were times when, I'll go back to what we talked about earlier, when you're teaching them something low impact, like how to shovel the driveway when it's snowing, or, how to cut the grass. They could cut their finger off with a lawnmower or get hurt, but, it's not that hard, especially with lawnmowers these days. They're not that dangerous. But when they're driving a car, man, the stakes get really high. You both could get hurt really bad. And I recall one time my son Alex and I were driving to a place in Indiana, and he wanted to drive, and he was learning how to drive on the highway. And this part of I-65 in Louisville is like 5-6 lanes across. It's a pretty dynamic drive as you're going up, right? You're going through downtown, you're crossing bridges, you're making choices on exit ramps and all that. And I remember the car starts going really slowly. We're going like 70, then all of a sudden we're going 60, then all of a sudden we're going 50, and semi trucks are like leading past us, and cars are honking, and I'm like, "What?" And I'm in the passenger seat, not using my soft words, not using my kind-hearted, patient words. I'm using words like, "Put your foot on the gas. Why are we going so slow?" And he's like, "Dad, I swear, I've got it pressed to the floor." And so then we start going 40 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour. And that's when I realized something's wrong with my car. So we get off the ramp, and the ramp was elevated. We coasted, no joke, we coasted into a gas station with a mechanic. He lifts the hood of my car, and he just goes, that was a $3,000 because, my transmission had gone out, and I just, this whole thing. But I remember thinking.
Meanwhile, you're chewing his head off.
Oh, I thought, oh my goodness, why do we let 17-year-olds behind the wheel of a car? It wasn't his fault. It was not his fault at all. And so sometimes when we're teaching our kids skills like this, whether they're big or small, our patience is going to be tested.
Yeah. And, you got to pick the moment sometimes to teach certain things because you may not be in the mode of being patient. So understand that's a key principle. And if it's not the right time, then you can be patient and wait and find when the right time is. You're ready. Maybe your kid's ready, but you got something going on, or you got to finish, like schedule it in maybe when you're going to tackle one of those kinds of things. Just like if you would at work, you don't do everything at the drop of a hat just because it needs to be done in that moment necessarily. You schedule maintenance, you figure out when is the right time. Is it the beginning of the day, the end of the day? Is it, when is that going to fit in best? So I think just a reminder to us all is pick the time. Sometimes you're more prone to teach something that's delicate or complex than you are, outside of that. I thought about patience in their own lives. So helping them learn patience through some practical, life skills. I love team sports. I had 2 girls. Olivia was in gymnastics for a little while and dance. Abigail was, theater, music. So not really, you wouldn't call that necessarily a teammate, but I can tell you what, man, and when they are preparing for a play, and both girls did this, there's preparation, there's auditions, casting, a lot of practice. So you are kind of a teammate, and and it's not always your turn. It's not always your time. And so, maybe your kid is not quite the quarterback yet, or the pitcher. And in our case with the girls, they didn't get the lead, or they didn't get the part that they wanted, but their friend did. And so helping in those opportunities, that's a patience of life lesson that's available for us to hone in on, because, even learning how to celebrate others' wins in the face of our own loss.
Yeah.
Their friend got the lead.
Yeah.
So how do you celebrate that person, even though you're hurt and you're disappointed? That is a lesson in God's timing. It's a lesson in right now you aren't ready for that, or maybe that person has something going on you have no awareness of, but God does.
Yeah.
And that's why he chose for the path to go the way that it did. And now you stop and look and learn, what is in this for me, even though that's not what the outcome I wanted. I can learn patience. And then the second guiding principle that we're talking about, vision, is we don't always see
That's
the
right.
full picture. I heard an analogy of sometimes our life is picture you're standing in front of a really large wall. It goes up 100 feet high and 1,000 feet from left to right. And you're standing looking at this 3-foot section. That's all that we're able to see. That's how our vision is honed in, just right here. We can't see the whole thing. God can. God knows how it all fits together. He knows how everything flows. And sometimes we are, in our limited sight, frustrated by the outcome or the process that we're in, or the what's not happening. And you've got to understand that you may be able, to a degree, to zoom out some. And so now your sight goes from just this 3-foot circle to maybe 10, 20, something like that, but not 1,000 or 10,000 feet from left to right, And so understanding and helping our kids understand that there is a bigger picture.
Yeah.
I know it's not the same word as vision, but there is a bigger picture that we've got to keep in mind as dads. I saw in here, I love this note that you wrote about, I'm not raising boys, I'm raising future men. And so that's a longer term vision, and they're not going to understand that in these moments. You're not going to say to a 5-year-old, look, the reason we're doing this is because one day you're going to be a man with a family, and you're going to be a father yourself. That just doesn't compute with a 5-year-old. Now, a 20-year-old, more so, right? So understanding where we are in that vision, I think, is something that I just wanted to throw out.
And it's interesting, even at a relatively young age, like early teens. Now, this has got to be dripped in, I think, at the right times and in the right ways and in the right spirit. But I would occasionally tell my kids, hey, I've got to make a decision about something. And here's the decision that I'm going to make. Your mom and I talked about it, and here's the decision we're going to make. I think we got a good reason. I think our logic is sound. I think it's biblical, or, and I may or may not explain the decision depending on how complex it is. Then I have told my boys, hey, one day, you might be married, you might be a dad, and you will have the joy of making some of these decisions yourself. But guess what? Today's not that day. I'm going to make that decision. So there have been times even where I try to show them the future a little and give them a glimpse of, like, hey, a lot of the decisions you make as parents, a lot of them are right and wrong. There's like, don't rob a bank, and, don't murder people. Like, there's some real obvious right and wrong things. But a ton of the decisions you make as parents are judgment calls. And the evidence might be 70-30, 60-40, 50-50, and you just got to make a call. What are we going to do? And I liked, generally speaking, to expose my boys to my decision matrix for a lot of those judgment calls. Because what I was trying to prepare them for is one day you too will need to make some of these choices. And you're going to find that you're going to have incomplete information, or you're going to find that the information is 50-50, or you're going to find that both paths can work, but you got to pick one because you can't do both. You can't be in two places at once. And so a lot of those things where we're training them to do something like make a complex decision, I like to let them see behind the curtain, behind the tapestry, at some of the criteria and all that. Because back to your point, I remember reading a book years ago, recommend it to anybody who wants to dive into this topic. But I think if I'm not mistaken, it's called Raising Men, Not Boys. That's the title of the book. It's by Mike Faberez. And I loved that book. And most of what I needed out of that book was in the title. That's just the idea, that I'm not trying to raise boys. I'm trying to raise future men. Therefore, I want them to learn how to think. I want them to learn how to weigh choices and arrive at a decision and then move on and then look for God's either validation or correction or rebuke or discipline later to go, man, maybe that wasn't the best choice, and some of them are obvious. Some of them are not. Again, as an example, this is like basic kind of like teenager stuff 101. You might teach your kids how to interview for a job or the principles around job application. Right? Fill out the application on time, make it error-free, make sure your resume doesn't have typos, show up 5-10 minutes early for the interview, dress a notch above what the job requires. There's 8 or 10 things you can do to kind of stand out, or at least, stand out, at least stand effectively as you're interviewing for jobs. One of the little hacks I used to teach my boys, and still do, is when you go in for a job interview, I want you to mentally think, how would you interview the boss? So a lot of the employees will show up and they'll just sit there, and the boss will say, so you're here to interview for the position? And they'll say, yes. Do you have any experience? A little. I used to work at this company. Okay. Tell me about a time when, and all the kid does, all the 15, 17, 20-year-old does is answer the questions that they're asked. Let me help you. That will make you a B+ candidate at best, and only if you have the right answers. If you want to be the A+ candidate, walk in with some questions of your own. Now, not questions like, can I get an extra $1? How much family time do you give? What if I don't want to come in on a Tuesday? Like, not those kind of questions.
Yeah. Like, what are you looking for in a person that's going to do this job and 6 months from now is going to be successful?
I remember, Lawson, interviewing 6 or 8 people for a pretty high-paying job when I was working at an energy company. And I remember one young lady came in, and she was sharp. I mean, really sharp, and asked some good questions. And then at the very, very end of the conversation, I just said, hey, that's all I need for now. Anything else on your mind? And she had like, it's like she had a weapon behind her, and she's like, it was ready and it was loaded. And she goes, I only have one last question. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, have I said anything to you that would cause you to not want to offer me this job?
That's great.
And I remember thinking,
that's good.
You just got hired.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. I remember thinking, that is absolutely brilliant. And I just remember being so struck by it. And I'm like, not only was it a bold and a confident question, which said something about her character, but secondly, it was unexpected, like not shocking, like it was inappropriate, but I was like, wow, that was, and she kind of kept her powder dry, right? And waited till the very end because she wanted it to end on that.
Right.
She wanted that to be the last thing we talked about. And I don't know who coached her, but all I know
good
was,
close.
Woo, that was a smart move.
That's a good close. Yeah.
So as we do teach our kids these skills, we're talking about things like vision. We're talking about things like responsibility. We're talking about things like patience that both of you are going to have to learn. A verse I'd like to mention, Lawson, I'd like you to react to this verse, is in Luke. Jesus is telling this parable. In the King James, it's called the parable of the dishonest manager, or in the ESV, it's called dishonest manager. In the NIV, it's a little more benevolent. It says the parable of the shrewd manager. And the story is basically, he owed people. He went out and got money, settled all of his debts, and paid off his debts in a way that was pretty savvy, although, a little edgy. And at the end of this parable, toward the end, Jesus says, one who is faithful in very little is also faithful in much. And one who's dishonest in very little is also dishonest in much. And that's a principle around this area of responsibility and growing in your scope and your complexity of what you can handle. What is that? What is that story or that idea of being faithful in little and then being entrusted with much, or being dishonest in little, being dishonest in much? What does that make you think of?
Man, I am so grateful that God has had my children in a place where, as young adults, He's got them right now. In that text thread, I'll reference back, just reading some of their comments. I reflect on this as responsibility, and that scripture is as we're approaching these practical life skills, and them, our kids of various ages learning, a backdrop of knowing that we are stewards of what God has granted us. So that can be resources like money. It can be resources like where you live, what family you're born into, or what you're maybe born without. Can also be an opportunity. I remember back to the conversation we had on the episode with Orv Kimbrough. He came from absolutely nothing, horrible childhood. And what he found was what God was gifting him with. And he went on to steward that well. And so, one who is faithful in very little is also faithful in much. One who is dishonest in very little is also dishonest in much. What Olivia said in the text thread was, she's like, I don't necessarily remember like some certain individual life lesson that we sat down and taught, but what I experience now as a 24-year-old is I hear your voices sometimes in my head of like, no matter what, Dad says, nope, not even a little white lie. Not even the reason you don't want to go to that sleepover is because you're just tired and you don't want to. You don't need to come up with something, right? Like, just tell the truth, because that's just what you do. She hears her mom's voice, she said, from particularly, she was thinking back on being a teenager, where the temptation at school was to keep up with who was showing midriff or who was dressing in a certain way at an event outside of school. And she heard her mom's voice saying, let's make a classy choice. Value your values and present yourself.
Value your values. Nice.
In a valuable way. Don't show everything, right? And so, look, for whatever reason, Somalia stuck with me when it comes to gratitude. That was as a young man in the Marine Corps when we were in Mogadishu. That was just a pit of what the worst of what humans can become and do to one another. I saw so many mothers who were just, they themselves were, withering away to nothing, holding a baby that was just on the verge of death. And I saw a lot, and it was like, there's no way that I'll ever leave this environment without being able to, I won't forget how good I have it from this point on, 6 months there. And then really for the rest of my life, I didn't want to be that guy going, oh, you think that's tough? Well,
I'll show you tough. Yeah.
But it has provided the opportunity for a background of context in opportunities where maybe we all, myself included, felt a little bit like, oh man, we don't get to go do that, or that didn't work out the way we wanted, so let's zoom out and think God has gifted us with something. Olivia, with your dance, with your ability to communicate how body movement. Now she's a yoga instructor. She has used what God gave her. And so there are plenty of times where our kids have something that they may need a reminder that you've been granted this responsibility to steward well what God has in mind for your purpose. And he's given you these things to use for his good. And so maybe that moment is less about you didn't get the pitching job. You're not going to be the quarterback or the lead in that play or the job, or you had a miscarriage. Whatever the case is, helping ourselves as dads, as husbands, and helping our children remember that we have a responsibility that God has presented us through his resources to do his will.
Good word, man. Well, and I think the picture you painted earlier about being up in front of this big wall and you can only see part of it, that's true about our kids, and that's true about us as well compared to what God can see, obviously. But often we can see a wider angle than our kids can.
Than your kids, right.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when they're 1 or 2, and often even when they're 15 or 20, we can just see a wider angle. Now that gap tends to shrink a bit. We can see a lot more than a 2-year-old, but maybe not any more than our 20 or 25-year-old, because they get their own vision for their life, and God speaks right, through them and all that. What I think is fascinating about that is one of the things that we've got to help our kids see are the stakes or the costs of things we're teaching them and how those apply. So, for example, if our son makes a careless mistake while he's tying his tie, he has to retie it, or he looks silly at the dance or the wedding. Like, the cost of that going wrong is, a mild form of embarrassment. Where when you get to, again, back to driving a car or something like that, or getting married, the cost of that being broken or going wrong is life altering. It could be, you can cause people to die. A car is a killing machine if it's not used right? So across the spectrum of you could stub your toe to you could kill an innocent child, across this giant spectrum, we've got to help our kids understand over time, what are the stakes of getting this right? And what are the stakes of getting this wrong? Right. Not to freak them out or make them nervous every time they drive a car, but to make them aware, right? The way our house is configured, it's we got an entry door that we use most often, and it's at a corner of our house behind a corner, and it's right by the driveway. And so what we taught all of our kids as they were driving is, hey man, you got to pull into this driveway with your game face on, not on your phone, not paying attention, because your little brother may come running right out this back door. You got to know, this is the point. This is the most dangerous place near our house. More dangerous than even the street, because the odds of them running in the street are pretty low, but the odds of them coming down on the steps and running into the driveway are fairly high because they do it 1,000 times a day. So helping our kids realize, hey man,
this is dude.
What's around this corner. That's part of our job as a mom and a dad, is to help our kids realize, hey man, this choice you're about to make, or these choices you're about to make, here are the costs of getting them wrong. Here are the costs of getting them right. And again, not to frighten them, but to help them own the responsibility of what they're leaning into and to be good stewards of what they have. Right. So as we do this, I want to remind the dad listening that I hope a few things are true. One, hope you're dialed in to teaching your kids valuable life skills, whether it's something as simple as, how to hit a baseball, or as complex as how to drive a car. I hope what you also recognize as part of your God-given Ephesians 2:10 good work responsibility is that you help your kids know and understand Scripture. That is not the Christian school principal's job. That's not the youth pastor's job. That's not your wife's job only. You guys can team up on that for sure. My wife does an amazing job in this area. I want them to know that I care a lot. I probably care more about them being able to read and understand God's word than for them to max out their 401k or get into a great college. There's things that I place at a higher or lower priority. And as we are leaning in as dads, lean in, teach them the value of Scripture, model the way, right? The best way I can teach my kids how to be a godly husband is to be one, best I can. I'm not going to get it perfect. We all know that. But my example is going to do more than my words. Way more is caught than taught. So I hope that you've learned a lot today. Lawson, by the way, you shared some great stories and some really good examples of ways to engage. I love that you were able to text your wife and your kids about what they learn. Now, what I'd like to do is I want to shift to do a bit of an introduction. The thing that you're about to hear on today's show, I think is fantastic. I don't want to steal all of its thunder. So let me just say this. You're going to be entertained. And we hope this will cause you to want to share today's episode with the dad that you know. And then third, I just want you to know that you're going to love what you're about to hear. So for the next few minutes, relax, turn up the volume, and enjoy what you're about to hear. Now, if you happen to be on one of the major platforms, like a Spotify or Apple or something like that, you're going to really enjoy the experience. We're also going to release this thing as a separate file so you can come to it a different way than be at the tail end of a podcast. But without any further ado, I present to you, Stay Off the Highway.
This one goes out to any of you dads who have gone through the headache of teaching your teenage kids how to drive. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes the only thing that you wish they would do is stay off that highway.
Well, I knew this day it soon would come. You'd learn to drive and it wouldn't be fun. We'd stay on track if you could read a map, but I guess you can only use a mobile app. The world out there, it's a frightening place. Other people driving like a NASCAR race. People speeding fast and flying through turns, leaving middle-aged dad at a loss for words. So please don't hesitate to put your foot on the brake. I don't know how much of this I can take, yeah. Stay off the highway. You've been driving completely wrong. You must do it my way. Turn the volume down on that dumb song. Through all our city, across our town, you're checking your phone, you keep looking down. If you text again, I'm gonna cut you off. That pedestrian's just walking across. Learn to shift and quit stalling out and crying those tears and doing that pout. You better learn to watch that road. If you get pulled over, just do what you're told. Must signal before you turn. You can't peel out and make rubber burn. Sometimes you can't just pull straight in. We are the parallel parkers. Get in the driveway. Fix those tire tracks on my lawn. I made it through today, thanks to the many meds I'm on. Get in the driveway, our mailbox is lying on the lawn. You must do it my way, or I'm gonna go get your mom. There was no distance between you and that guy. A nearly disastrous wreck, I knew that we were gonna die. Do you think that you can learn not to swerve? You were on my every nerve. Was I this clueless at your age? Can't wait till this is over. Get in the driveway, our mailbox is lying on the lawn. You must do it my way, or I'm gonna go get your mom. Stay off the highway, you've been driving completely wrong. You must do it my way. Turn the volume down on that dumb song. Watch out for the hydrant. It is gonna rip your bumper off. I don't know why I let you drive my brand new car. I never should have done that.
Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, Remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in.
We're sorry. Your call cannot be completed as dialed.
Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.